the number one skill set to master is sales,
Hmm.
because sales drives every other thing in the business. If you can't sell, you can't sell your product or your service to your ideal client. You can't sell it to somebody to come work for you. You can't sell it to your team to build a vision for where it is that you want to go. You have to be able to communicate that for marketing and advertising and structure and, culture, all of that stuff. When you learn, if you would, and it's the one thing most people want to avoid, right? Like
Yeah,
they,
this is a
they
hard
want to
part, right?
avoid it. It's like, wait a second. Yeah, if you master this, and it doesn't take long, you can get good enough at it if you really work at it in a few months where you can really start expanding on that skill set rapidly.
Most business owners think that if they want to make money, they've got to work harder, more hours, more hustle, more grind. But according to today's guest, that I'm really excited about, that's one of the biggest mindset traps keeping entrepreneurs stuck. For nearly 30 years, David Neagle has been helping business owners break through income ceilings by not by working harder, but by thinking differently. He knows this firsthand because David went through being a high school dropout, a forklift driver making minimum wage, to building multi-million-dollar businesses. And now he helps entrepreneurs scale to 7, 8, 9 figures in under a year by shifting how they approach their success. His philosophy is simple. Your income isn't capped by time, it's capped by mindset. If you want to grow without burning out, you've got to learn to delegate, receive support, and stop running your business like a one-person show. David, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today.
I'm happy to be here. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It is going to be a lot of fun. And look, I want to ask you first about the work harder trap. A lot of small business owners, when they want to grow, they work a lot. They spend 80 hours in the office. They're they're not spending time with their family. They're doing everything they can to grow their business. And I know this firsthand because I've watched my father grow businesses. I've watched other small business owners grow businesses, and I love small business. And it is a really exhausting effort if you go about it in some of the wrong ways. But you say this is what you call the working class mindset. It actually limits people's growth. So what is the first step business owners can take to break free from that belief and start to go down a path that allows them to build the life they want without breaking the life they have?
Well, I think that the biggest part of the problem is where small business owners generally starting, and they're usually coming out of working class mindset. They worked for somebody before, and that's the only experience they have in life. They've never been around business. They've never been around people that make a lot of money. They've never seen leverage applied before. Their association with money is trading time for money and working very hard and struggling and sacrificing and putting in tremendous amount of hours. So they approach it from that position. The other thing is that we have a work we teach people hard work ethic, right? Work very hard. And I'm not saying that that's bad. I like to use the word diligent more because what I found, and this was just a reflection of myself, the two major jumps that I made very early on were when I was driving the forklift, I tripled my income in a month by changing three things in my attitude.
Hmm.
And I couldn't believe that it happened. I mean, I was struggling for 2 years, working harder, trying to figure out, we didn't call them side hustles back in the day, but extra work. I would plow snow. I lived in Chicago. I was doing everything I could to earn more money, and I was not getting out of the situation. My whole idea was I quit high school. I'm going to go back to college and learn a skill or something or a trade and then be able to support my family better. But for 2 years, I was struggling. Nothing was happening. So it got to a point where I was just a disaster. I was a mess. I was an emotional mess.
Hmm.
I had this like emotional breakdown one night. Everything went wrong at work. And I decided to change these three things about myself because there was this voice in my head that said, David, change your attitude. So I changed those three things. 30 days later, my income tripled. And I was shocked. I'm sitting there looking at the checks and I can't believe this happened to me. So for the first time in my life, this caused me to want to study. I wanted to know how this happened because I figured if I could duplicate this, I could really be a success in my life. So that put me on a path for about 7 years. In that process, the first thing that I found out was because my attitude was so bad, I was only seeing the things that were difficult in life. I couldn't see opportunities. I mean, literally couldn't see them. I know that that might be hard for some people to grasp because you would think to yourself, I'm a pretty smart guy. If there was an opportunity to triple my income, I'm sure I would notice it. That's absolutely not correct because you're seeing through the filter. And on top of it, usually if the idea of making a lot of money or it being easy, we're taught that that's wrong
Hmm.
in the middle class, right? That's like something to avoid. It's wrong. There's this whole duality about rich people not necessarily being great people. Like it's a love-hate relationship that the working class has with the wealthy. So there's a lot that they don't see. The second part was that I when I got to 50,000 a year, when I started my business, I was about 50,000 a year. I wanted to turn it into a monthly income. I set a goal for myself to do it in a month. And at the end of the month, I was no closer than I was before I had started. So then I did it again another month. Again, I was just like hitting rock bottom. And I had a mentor at the time, and he said to me, David, it's easier to make 50,000 a month than it is to make 50,000 a year.
Hmm.
And I thought he was messing with me, right? Like, just like teasing.
You're like, wait. You're telling me in 31 days, $50,000 is easier than it is in
Right.
365 days. That math is not
Yeah.
mathing for me right now.
Right. Right. Exactly. And he actually said to me, he goes, why would you work all year for 50,000 when you could do it in 30 days? So when I got off the phone with him, I thought to myself, what would be if he's right and I'm making this hard, what would be the easiest way for me to make 50,000 uh, in this month? And I thought, well, to sell one client for 50,000, but I didn't think I could do that. However, I did raise my prices to 15,000. The numbers and the math that I was using prior to that was actually making it hard. I didn't realize my mind was strategizing based on it needs to be hard.
Hmm.
So I made that change. In 2 weeks, I hit the 50 and I never went back. After that, I went over a million and I never had a money issue again after that. I was like, I got it. Okay, I've got this. So the idea is that most people, they believe that they start at the bottom and work their way to the top, just like they were taught in school, all through high school, college, whatever it is. And it's actually the reverse, right? You've got to see yourself above the place that you actually want to accomplish and then start there and work your way down, right? Like in sales, for instance, there's basically two kind of buyers out there. You have the buyer that their value is how much can they save? That's the only value that they have. The product is secondary to that, right? And then you have people where they have a value of what is the end value of the product, and I'm not as concerned about how much it costs. I'll spend what's necessary, right? So most people start off with the former, which is let me go after these people because I can relate to them better, but it's a sheer struggle to do it. When they change, and it's just a mindset shift. Go after people that have more of an ability, have a higher ideal client, and the sales will be easier and it will, the work will be easier. Everything will be easier about that. So that's kind of where I start with people with this idea of measuring where they are
Hmm.
as far as how they see the world and then getting them to see a completely different version of that so that it's really just making a decision to step into it.
And it sounds like from your perspective, it was partly a relationship with success, where you came from, and driving a forklift, and where a lot of people come from, which is trading time for money. And I love that that's the way you position that. Most people come from that world, and most people's families come from that world. And unless you're just a born entrepreneur, that's pretty much your experience. And you want to jump into entrepreneurship, you're looking for the value of saving a dollar for your business versus the value of producing 10x on the investment that you make. And when you change that shift, what are some tie downs that keep people from approaching success in the right way, either emotionally, psychologically, or even in a practical business sense?
So I'll tell you what the biggest one is, and then we could work backward from there. So in the 26 years that I've been working with people, the number one thing that I've seen that trashes a person's dream in their business is being concerned about what the people around them think when it comes to success.
Hmm.
It is the number one is the biggest problem, right? So they can get through a lot of different things, but when they start to get rejected or judged or criticized about how much money that they're making from their own family and friends, it collapses most individuals. They can't deal with it. They don't know how to deal with it. So that problem is basically what other people think, right? They're more concerned what other people think than they are about what they think and directing their own lives moving forward. I would say that is absolutely the biggest one. The next one is that they don't believe in themselves. They see themselves much lower. Like they here, this'll just put it as a nutshell. They don't think they're worth it.
Yeah.
They don't think they're worth the success. So that is a mindset issue that for some people they can get over it quickly. For some people it takes some time. They have to do a lot of study. They have to have some reference that says, I'm worth this, because if their reference from their childhood is saying that they're not worth it, that's with them every day. Instead of the truth, right? I come from also from a spiritual background with this, that, from a spiritual perspective, you're absolutely worth it. Why? Because you're here for a purpose.
Hmm.
You're here to do something very special. And you have all the faculties to be able to do that, but they must be developed in order for to get those results.
I think that you're nailing it on the head. In a lot of cases, it is you call them quantum leaps. When you make these quantum leaps, there's quite a shift in your life. As someone who earns a salary, for example, and then suddenly you're making that salary in a month. Well, that's a very different existence than you had prior,
Yeah,
and so
yeah, it
so
is.
there's maybe some cognitive dissonance as well. You're I'm not valuable. I'm not valuable enough for this. Yet you're doing it, and so, when you're talking about the work that's being done to help the relationship between success and the individual, what kind of work do people have to put in on a daily basis or a monthly basis to keep themselves in front of the game?
So I think that determines where a person's starting and what their ultimate goal is. When I started, it was just me. I did everything. Right now, there wasn't a lot because I had just started the business, but I was basically doing everything myself. And in those days, this was before the internet. I just hit the ground running, right? I did cold calls to businesses. I went and spoke on any stage I could get myself on. And then I would follow up, and do sales. So like the majority of everything I was doing was sales. Just making sales, making sales. And I had to learn the rest of it as I went. Like I needed to hire somebody. I eventually had to hire a salesperson so that I could go do the things that I needed to do to be able to expand the business. I think that so I believe that this is 100% true. The number one skill set to master is sales,
Hmm.
because sales drives every other thing in the business. If you can't sell your product or your service to your ideal client. You can't sell it to somebody to come work for you. You can't sell it to your team to build a vision for where it is that you want to go. You have to be able to communicate that for marketing and advertising and structure and culture, all of that stuff. When you learn, if you would, and it's the one thing most people want to avoid, right? Like
Yeah,
they
this is a
they
hard
want to
part, right?
avoid it. It's like, wait a second, yeah. If you master this, and it doesn't take long, you can get good enough at it if you really work at it in a few months, where you can really start expanding on that skill set rapidly.
The thing that I've observed in my short career in working with small businesses is that uh, there's a lot of business owners who avoid sales because it is hard work. It's calling people that you don't know. It's stranger danger. It's rejection immediately right into your ear, right to your face. For you, you were a speaker, and I know this story very well. You go and get on every single stage you possibly can, and sometimes the room is kind of empty, and it's not a great
Yeah,
experience. And you have that tough moment. You go, "Am I really? Is this really worth it?" But if those kinds of things are the selling part of it, but they get into these mindset. If I go and get marketing, if I go and build all these funnels, if I get advertising done, I'll get a bunch of customers. Well, what's at the end of the marketing funnel is sales. You have to go talk to these people and ultimately get them to buy your service or product. And you talk a lot about delegation, and that's the key to scaling. So can you walk through the maybe your process of where you went from one person to 15 people, or you went from a single proprietor to five people, and these business owners who are trying to sell their worth are finding themselves frantically moving between projects. They have so many hats on. They're trying to make payroll. They're doing all of these things, and they think that the hard work is going to help them grow, but is actually holding them back. So, what are some keys to getting delegation done right and done efficiently so that you can continue to sell at a high level?
Okay, great question. So let me start here. The first thing is to not look at sales as something that you're going out to get. It's something you're going out to give, right? You have to position your mind. I've got something of value that brings value to the marketplace, right? So, and I consider myself, I am a welcome intrusion into people's lives because I'm looking for people that have a need for what it is that I do. That makes it much easier. If you think you have to go out and get money, get money, get money, get money, like that's horrible. That's a horrible mindset position. However, I worked for 7 days a week for 7 years when I first started the business before I broke my stubborn streak because I developed this false belief nobody can sell better than me, right?
Yeah.
So if I hire a
Yeah.
salesperson, our sales are going to go down. I didn't want to go through that, but anyway, I did. Well, I had an assistant first and a bookkeeper, but then I hired a salesperson. And I got pretty lucky in the beginning because I hired somebody that had good sales experience. I was able to teach them the sales of my company, and they pretty much took off with it really well. So that was a great experience. I've had some salespeople that did not work out, but this one particular person I'm thinking of, they were pretty good. And then once that happened, it was like it gave me some breathing room to then look at what else that we need. Now I didn't finish high school, right? I don't spell well. I don't have good grammar. I need somebody that can actually write and write copy and market. So then we went out and we looked for that person. I needed somebody to help me get on stages. So we went out and looked for that person. And I realized very quick that if I was going to continue to do everything myself, I was going to go absolutely nowhere. But I think I took somebody's advice very early on when I finally decided to do it. Part of it was also like, how am I going to pay for these people?
Mm.
And somebody said they pay for themselves. If you hire A players, they pay for themselves. So I went out and started doing that. And I realized here's the one thing that I know to do. I know how to sell. I can create whatever revenue stream we need to pay for what we're doing. But see, a lot of people can't because they miss that first step,
Mm.
right? If you've got it down, whatever you need, you can go out and sell and make the money to do it.
I love that. You're the kind of guy, and I think that if you're listening to this and you're thinking about growing your business, you have to be, especially as a founder, you have to be someone who can go turn dirt into money, and
Yeah,
that's going to be where you are going to be the most valuable in your organization, at least for a while, until you find somebody else who can turn dirt into money, and then you can go do the other things in your
right.
business. And I think this ties back into the the thing you said earlier around the mindset that it takes to sell well, which is you are a welcome interruption. You're bringing value to the market, and that's a belief in yourself. That's a belief in yourself first, because it doesn't matter what you have. You could have the coolest aerospace technology that's ever existed in the world, but if you don't believe that you can pick up the phone and go call somebody and sell that, you'll never get it done. So I love that you've tied that into, you have to be a business owner who says, I am here for a special purpose, and spiritually speaking, I am here to change another person's trajectory or a business's trajectory for the positive
Right.
and for the better. And I think that um, that's an interesting place to be, as far as it can be a lonely place. Can you kind of talk about the lonely existence of somebody who's in that space, and why support and receiving support is so important for strategic growth?
Yes, it can be a very lonely place. Extremely lonely, in fact. So I realized very quickly that my family and my friends had no concept of what I was trying to do with my life. They didn't understand it. They weren't interested in it. the more I learned, it was like there seemed to be a bit of a wedge, not wedge like negative, but just a miss. They didn't understand.
Y-
I mean, that's just what it
you go
was. They
and
didn't
I
understand.
saw this in your book. You talk about this as well. You go to these like family reunions and they ask you what you do. You're like, oh, hey David, what do you do? What are you doing these days? And you kind of get into talking about what you do these days, and they say something. They just try and relate to you, but it's clear that they don't understand.
Right. They do not understand. They don't. And there's always some kind of negative slight about how much money you're making or whatever. So the answer to your question is that I started developing friendships with people that were going in the same direction that I was.
Hmm.
Because I was doing a lot of events, I met a lot of people. And I decided that I was going to create and cultivate friendships with those individuals so that I had somebody to relate to and I had a different level of friendship. Not that I wanted to get rid of the other ones, although I did clean out any friends or people around me that were toxic or, that kind of thing. I mean, I think everybody goes through that as an adult at some point. But I decided like I was gonna meet people, I was gonna have friends, I was gonna have relationships with people where we could actually help each other. Or we could pick up the phone and talk and say, you know what, I've had a really rough day. Or what do you think about this idea? And actually get an honest opinion, by somebody who's thinking versus somebody that's just going to tear you down,
I,
you
I,
know?
I think that's really important is to find people, and I had these people in my life, and I had to go through that. And I'm a younger professional, and everyone goes through this where I had friends that just it's not that they were negative, they just didn't relate. It was hard
Right.
for to have business conversations because they were in government, or they were in sciences, or they were in teaching or something like that, and it just conversations just went nowhere. They went back to memories that we had when we were younger, which is fine. I mean, I'm still friends with these people, but I'm not going to sit down and talk about the ideas that are going to help me grow my business with them. I'm going to find someone like David, and David's going to find someone that he met at another place. And honestly, those people are great network people for you as well. And I wonder from your end, as you have grown and gotten support as a really successful business person, as someone who's selling at a really high level because you understand that sales is the foundation of good business. How does support change over time? You take quantum leaps. How does support exist in different buckets as you grow as an organization?
You mean within the company itself?
Within the company, yeah, as you bring in more people into your organization, and then as your network grows as well, how do those relationships start to shift as you become more successful?
Well, I think so. First of all, one of the things that I had to learn how to do, and I can't take credit for this. What I did was I went out and I had somebody that worked with me, and I brought them up to the CEO position in my company. I recognized that I could manage, but that was not my number one skill set,
Mm,
nor did I want it to be. Right? I'm the face of the business. I'm out there. I'm doing my thing. And they came in and we started studying the idea of culture and building culture within the business, which changed the entire dynamic of the company in a great way, in an absolutely fantastic way. And we got to start getting input from everybody else in a positive way. I found out that most of the people that were working for me were actually afraid to tell me things, not because I was mean or whatever. It's just that um, they didn't feel secure in doing that because they were bringing their story into working for another company and that type of thing. So as I learned that, then the relationships got much better in what we were doing. And
yeah.
it became, I mean, we don't like to call it a family because families can be dysfunctional. We like to call it a team. I got schooled on that many years ago, but I agree with it. We want to operate like, like an NFL team, right? That
Yeah.
like everybody plays their role, there does their thing. We all support each other, we help each other, we hold each other accountable. And so that is expanded. And we know very well when somebody new comes into the company if they're going to fit into that culture bucket or not. And if they don't, it's just not a good fit. So we try to hire within that. And then with friendships, I'm very picky about friendships, right? Um, I have a high standard for people. I want people that are going to keep their word. I want people that are visionaries themselves for their own life. I have friends all over the world through the things that I've done, which is absolutely fantastic. But to bring somebody in as a close friend it requires a lot more. It's not just an acquaintance anymore.
Mm.
You're looking for people that really have a mind and they're thinking and they're active in what it is that they're doing. So I think it's changed. It's changed absolutely everything from where I started. It's gotten much easier. It's gotten a lot more fun. Before before COVID, we would travel so much, and a lot of the team would go with whenever we would travel, and then we would do things like if we were doing a live event, we might have a day on the front of it or a day or two on the back of it where we would just go play. We
Yeah.
would do things, go on a fishing charter, or we would go to an island somewhere, like all kinds of fun things to do and just really have a great time and experience life.
And as someone who transitioned, and this is the people who are working through their business and growing their business, this doesn't happen really in a short period of time. It happens over a long period of time, and it happens when you have real success. Is that there you'll find as a founder, and I've observed this, you're not the best CEO manager. And you mentioned this a
Right.
little bit before. You brought somebody in to help you with that, so that you could go be more of the face of the business and be David, versus CEO of life as now. So walk people through that experience, and maybe con- the how do I put this? I'm gonna put this in the best words I possibly can. The decision making process, maybe from the emotional side or even from the practical side, and how you came to the table and said, "Okay, I'm now gonna hire somebody to take over my business because it has your name on it."
Right. It wasn't easy at first, but I recognized like we hit a place where we were kind of stuck. We weren't going any further. And I got really honest about what was the reason for that. And that's because I had somebody that was kind of like an ops manager, but they were not trained as an ops manager, right? So they had good organizational skills, that type of thing. But they really weren't what we needed to cultivate the company to actually move it. So the decision then came like that position's not me. I'm not the one that's gonna do that, nor do I have the time to do it because I'm very busy with coaching and speaking and teaching and doing interviews and stuff. So that can't be me. So I had somebody that worked for me for a very long time who was a very ambitious person, worked their way into that, studied, learned, and wanted to crack at it. And they were able to help take us to the next level by doing it. But I had to back off,
So yeah, did you
right?
did you want to be that person? Did it occur to you while you were having these conversations? You kept internally thinking, I should really be doing that. I should really be the one who's taking over this. This should be my mission.
There was some of that. There was some of that.
Mm,
But I also knew that I didn't like it, right? And there was no and then like I can't be two people at the same time, right? If I'm going to run the company, it's one thing, but I can't be the product of the company at the same time,
yeah.
right? So in what I do, I'm the product, right? So that was a bit of a difficult decision, but I thought to myself, if I don't do this, we're not going to move. And what I had to do was I had to come to trust somebody implicitly, share the vision with this person. I also had a relationship with them, so I did trust them. And I said, okay, let's do this. I'll back off, right? You start leading the company. You even teach me, and I'll follow. And then that's the direction that we'll go. And it was amazing when we did that. Everything began to, I mean, everything changed because now we had somebody who was actually paying attention to all these different things. This person that I had skill sets I couldn't even hope to have, right? And I was like, my God, I've been missing so much by not having somebody in that position and just kind of trying to run it with me overseeing lightly over things. Now, this person brought in structure, they brought in culture, they brought in systems, all of that, and which made everything much easier.
The theme is consistent. You talked about not seeing opportunities when you were in a space where you were growing or trying to get into the business world or trying to be an entrepreneur. You weren't observing them because your mindset wasn't in a place to see them. And I think later on in success, that theme holds true, that you were still blind to some opportunities, but when they present themselves and you trust, you see how important they are, to growing and becoming the next phase of the person you are and the business that you have. And I wonder, from your perspective as the product of the business and somebody who is selling themselves and is sold by the business. Where do you observe most organizations struggle when it comes to trust with employees? So trust with the CEO is one thing, and implicit trust there. But when you're bringing on the accountant, or you're bringing on the ops manager, and it's yours, and it's truly your baby, like it's blood, sweat, and tears, everything you put into it, and you have to release a little bit of trust to other people, the responsibility back and forth. How did you observe that happening in your business, and then how do you help business owners do that?
Well, the number one thing is that you have to allow mistakes and you have to reframe them as lessons, and you can't take anything personally.
Mm,
So, what I see working with business owners all the time, the biggest problem they have is that every time one of the team does something, they make a mistake, they do an error, they screw up, whatever, they take it personally and they get triggered and they're angry. And it's like, don't even think for a second that your team member doesn't know that you're carrying this energy, right? So the idea is let them make mistakes, right? We want them to make mistakes. We want them to come to us with issues. Like if let's say that you give them an assignment and they're not going to get it done. I don't care what the reason is. That they feel safe enough to come to you and say, "Here's where we are. This is what's going to happen. This is not going to get done." Without you screaming or yelling or pushing back in a way where they're frightened for their job, because let's face it, they know it's a job,
mm.
and they know that any day that you come in, you could say goodbye, right? You don't have a job anymore.
They know, yes,
But if you,
right.
it's, I think so generally it's creating a safe space for everybody to be who they really are and work within the parameters of that vision and then work together for that vision. But we've experienced that if they feel safe, if we don't get triggered by what it is that they do, if we ask for their help, if we ask for their opinion, you've got a completely different culture going for yourself. Like, I'll give you, for instance, we don't, like, anybody in our team could take whatever time off that they want, right? We don't have like, you can have 2 days off or a week off for vacation. As long as your work is done, you can take off as much time as you want, right? And that has gone like amazingly, because people feel free,
Mm,
like they can come and go, and they work harder, like they get their stuff done. We haven't had any issues with people like, oh, they're slacking off or they're not doing this or they're taking off too much time. Nope, not one issue with that. Not one issue. Now, part of that is also hiring the right
right,
people,
right,
but
right.
people can people can live, learn, and train in a culture that gives them as much freedom as they want. We pay top of scale for people, but we expect A players to come in. So it's a really great environment to work in. It's a lot of fun.
I think that there's two parts. One is your hiring strategy has to be so aligned with your values and your culture
Yeah,
to bring in people that are going to work because they have meaning in the business that they are working for, and then you're going to have those A players on your team. And then your point is, look, if you give them the freedom to be safe and have a space that gives them creativity and also mistakes, and they feel secure, they don't take too much time off because they like working. People
yeah,
like
right.
working, oddly enough. When you take work away from people, they tend to not do very well, actually. So I love that. I think that that's a really, really important point for business owners to know. And I've got one last question for you, and it's going back to your bread and butter. Okay, I titled this question. I'll give you some preference, a preface. The 7-figure breakthrough for small business owners. Okay, so you've helped countless entrepreneurs hit 7 figures in under a year. You mentioned 7, 8, 9 figures, but we'll stick with
Mhm.
7, and then you go from there. If a small business owner is hovering in the 6-figure range and feels stuck, what is one shift they need to make today to finally get to 7 figures this year?
Get their math right. That's one of the first places we look at, is your math right, right? A lot of times they're undercharging for what they're doing.
Mm,
They're comparing themselves incorrectly in their marketplace, right? So instead of going, what's the average doing, we go, what is the top in your marketplace charging, right? and who is their customer base, and why can't you charge the same thing if you get the same result? It's a big thing. If the math is wrong, everything falls apart. Nothing works. If they're doing all the other things correctly, it's almost always a math problem
Mm.
right? It's a math problem, or they don't have the right ideal client. So we adjust those two things, and if they're willing to do the work that's necessary, they'll go right over seven figures. Oh, like, another thing is this, and you probably know this very well. Inside the sales conversation, they're not actually asking for the sale,
Yeah.
right? You got to ask for the sale, you know, and not be afraid of what your price is, and when you do that, like, they come back to me and they're like, "Oh my God, I asked for this money and they said yes." I'm like, "Yes, yeah. People want to buy."
It's
Like, surprisingly enough, people want to buy.
it's weird, right? When you ask for what you want, you get it, and
Yeah, you get it.
it's a really I love this. I love there's two parts of this. The first is the small business part, right? It's hard to do $50,000 a month if you're selling your service or product for $1,000 a pop, right? That's a
Right,
lot of work. You're gonna have to scale. That's really unscalable. So your
right.
story early in the show was you went to $15,000, and then you started growing in your value, and you sold on value and not on the fear that people are going to say no. You start selling at a price where you think, oh, I think people will say yes to $29.99, right? I think that they'll say yes to this and they won't say no to that because you try.
I was at $495.
Right.
That's how bad it was. That's how, like, and I'm thinking to myself, there's no way that anybody would pay this much money. And I couldn't have been more wrong.
And you start thinking with your own pocket, especially in the beginning, right? You start thinking, well, I
Yeah,
wouldn't pay 4 grand for this. I wouldn't pay 15 grand for that. But there are people in your marketplace who will, because they see the value. And if you see the value in what you're doing, and then the second part of this is you can raise your prices, but if you're not asking for what you want, you will never get it. That
correct.
100% true. And I mean, and you might get a bluebird every now and then, but you're not going to be making seven figures this year, waiting on people
No.
to come to you. David, you are awesome. I can't tell people how incredibly excited I am to have you on the show. Your knowledge base is you got 26 years of this, and I think that people should really learn more from you, be able to find where you are. So what's going on in your world? Where would you send people to get more information about how to work with you?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's been a real honor. If they want to learn more about what we talked about today, we've got something called the Quantum Leap Blueprint. Okay. You're going to put the link for it in. The link's a little complicated, so I'm not going to read it. But if they just check out your drop down, they can get the link for it. They can go to our website and check it out. Our podcast is the Successful Mind Podcast. We've been doing it since 2017. They can go check out all those things for free. And we have a big event coming up in Atlanta in June 15th through the 17th, which is called Becoming 12X, turning your annual income into a monthly income, and doing it this year.
David, it's a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for being on the Sales Gravy podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Please make sure to click like and subscribe so you never miss a single video. And if you want more sales training content, go to learn.salesgravy.com.